As a kid, my grandfather and I used to take adventures into New York City. We'd hop on the train and explore Ellis Island, Chinatown, and the World Trade Center. But what always stuck with me wasn't the landmarks, it was the construction. Every trip, something was being rebuilt. A sidewalk torn up, scaffolding draped across a building, cranes lifting steel into the sky. And when I would come back months later, that project would be finished, but only for something else to be under construction. I remember asking him once, "Will this city ever be finished?" He laughed and responded, "Probably not." Now, at the time, I thought that answer was strange. Wasn't the goal to finish, to get to the perfect version of something? But as I got older, I realized New York City isn't supposed to be finished. It's supposed to be alive, always under construction, always evolving. And that idea that nothing alive is ever finished really stuck with me, because when I think about the people who shaped me in my own life, especially my mother, I realized that they were under construction too, but just in a different way. They didn't hand me perfection, they handed me momentum. And they taught me that the goal wasn't to finish, but it was to keep building. And so I started to wonder, what if we all started to think about ourselves that way? Now, I was lucky enough to grow up with a mom who lived this mindset every day of her life. She was a special education teacher for 30 years, and early in her career, she would get so frustrated when students would come to her and say, "Oh, I can't do it," or "You do it for me." It was literally like pulling teeth to get them to even try. But then she discovered the work of Stanford psychologist and professor Carol Dweck, and it completely changed her world. Now, Dweck's research found that the way we think about ability shapes what we become, and she characterized people into having one of two distinct mindsets. Those with a fixed mindset believe that talent and intelligence are innate. You either have them or you don't. So when you fail, it's proof of a limitation. But those with a growth mindset believe that abilities are developed through strategy, effort, and persistence. They see failure not as a proof of a limitation, but rather as evidence of learning. And that one discovery changed everything about how my mom taught and later how I lived. She stopped praising her students for being smart and started praising them for getting smarter. And when a kid said, "I can't do this," she would always add a little ... yet at the end. And that little word transformed everything. It reminded her students that growth takes time, that effort matters more than instant success. But as I got older, I realized that not everyone thinks this way. Heck, I definitely don't always have a growth mindset. We live in a world that doesn't leave room for yet, a world that wants everything right now. We live in a culture obsessed with immediacy, instant success, instant gratification, instant everything. We crave change, but we want it right now. We mistake urgency for progress. It's what Dweck's team calls the tyranny of now. It's the pressure to perform instead of learn, to prove instead of improve. And when I think about it now, I realize that my mom was teaching something psychologists had already put into words. Carol Dweck called it the power of yet. That one word turned failure into possibility, the difference between a dead end and a detour. Yet gives us a path to the future, while the tyranny of now traps you in the need for instant results. Because yet is patient. Yet says growth takes time, that effort matters more than immediacy. Yet gives us the courage to keep trying even when everything feels stuck. And I didn't know it then, but the power of yet would save me years later when I found myself trapped inside my own mind. In the 9th grade, I started developing obsessive-compulsive disorder. It started out small. I had to pump the soap a certain number of times. If I high-fived a teammate who was bad at lacrosse, I somehow thought his bad luck would rub off on me. And soon, every tiny action had to be perfect, or something bad might happen. Now, looking back, I can clearly see that I was living in the tyranny of now. My brain was in overdrive, demanding perfection in every moment. Every thought felt urgent, every mistake permanent. I was trapped in a cycle of doing and redoing, convinced that if I didn't get it right now, something bad might happen. And then one day, my mom, in her infinite wisdom, noticed something strange. My sister's bottle of hand soap was almost full, and mine half gone. So she came into my room and said, "Let's take a little quiz." And it was an OCD screening test. And once it said that I likely had it, she didn't panic. She said, "Okay, let's figure this out." And that week, we saw a specialist. And that's when I believe my true education began. Because therapy wasn't about snapping out of it. It was about willing myself to be better. It was about practice, rewiring my brain one uncomfortable moment at a time. I had to agree with the thoughts that scared me most. I'll get sick, something bad will happen, I'll play bad, and then watch nothing happen. Now, it was brutal. I failed constantly, but every time I failed and tried again, I learned something. Failure wasn't the opposite of progress. It was the progress. Each time I failed and tried again, I was teaching my brain that I wasn't there yet, but I could be. And slowly, those compulsions lost their grip. Something I thought was impossible, something I doomed myself to live with for the rest of my life, was suddenly gone. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened through patience, effort, and support. It happened through evolution. And even when I wanted to give up or feel sorry for myself, I could hear my mom's voice in the back of my mind. What are you going to do about it? Overcoming OCD wasn't just about healing my mind. It changed how I saw change itself. I started to realize that what my mom taught in the classroom wasn't just about learning. It was about living. Growth isn't a subject you master once. It's a way of moving through the world. Change wasn't something that happened to me. It was something that I could actively shape. And that process of rewiring my brain taught me about how change actually works. Slowly, imperfectly, and one uncomfortable step at a time. And I've seen that lesson repeat itself throughout my entire life. Whether it was getting cut from the Colby men's lacrosse team and finding other opportunities like this TEDx, or coming out of the closet to my closest friends and feeling more loved and supported than I could ever imagine. Each of those moments pushed me out of comfort and into growth. And together, they taught me something simple but profound. We don't evolve once. We evolve constantly as individuals and collectively. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that these same patterns that keep us stuck in our personal lives, they keep us stuck as a society. I started seeing it everywhere in how we talk, in how we learn, and even how we lead. Now, during the 2020 election, I got really into politics, and probably because it was COVID and it was the only new thing on TV. And watching leaders on both sides of the aisle, I noticed a pattern. Everywhere I looked, people were calling for revolutions, complete upheavals to wipe the slate clean and start over. But those revolutions, they rarely worked. Sure, they made headlines, they stirred emotions, but too often would collapse under their own weight. And it made me question why something meant to create progress so often ended up destroying it instead. And that's when it clicked. Real progress doesn't come from starting over. It comes from adapting. It comes from evolution. But in moments of frustration, we forget that. With these so-called revolutions, we often declare everything in the past as bad or insist that we need to start from scratch. We pick new heroes and martyrs for change, craving something instant, something that feels like progress right now. But in doing so, we forget how far we've already come, how many people carried the mantle before us to get here, and how many will have to carry it forward to make it better. Real change doesn't erase what came before, it builds on it. And you could see it everywhere. Let's take education, for example. When the chalkboard was first introduced at Yale, professors protested. When the calculator came out, people thought it was going to be the end of math. When the internet arrived, they said it would destroy learning. And now with AI, people are saying the same thing. It will ruin education. It will replace creativity. It will make us worse thinkers. But every time, the story's the same. The chalkboard made knowledge more shareable. The calculator made math more complex. The internet made research more accessible. And AI, we're going to hear about the powerful capabilities of AI from another speaker in just a little bit. Each change felt like an ending, yes, but in reality, it was just evolution. We live in the tyranny of now without even realizing it, and that's why revolutions are so tempting. They give us the illusion of instant progress. But real progress, real evolution, takes conflict. It takes discomfort. And most of all, it takes time. It's not supposed to be harmonious. It's supposed to be hard. And that's what makes it worth doing. So maybe our biggest challenge today isn't to be revolutionaries, but to remember how to be evolutionaries. Because that mindset of refining and not replacing is something our country once understood. Now, our founding fathers were, yes, revolutionaries, but they were also evolutionaries. They didn't just build a nation, they built a framework for that nation to grow. They knew that society would change, that values would deepen, and that progress would demand flexibility. And that's why they wrote a constitution that could be amended, a living document designed to grow with its people. And look at what it's allowed us to do. The 13th Amendment, ending slavery. The 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. The Civil Rights Movement, expanding freedoms to more Americans. Each one of those moments didn't rewrite who we are. They refined who we are. They strengthened the promise of equality and liberty without erasing the foundations that those promises were built on. And that's why our country has lasted, because we've learned to evolve, to preserve what makes us strong and change what holds us back. When we go down the road of revolution, of wiping the slate clean, we risk losing the lessons of history. We fail to learn from what came before, and when we forget those lessons, we start to repeat the same mistakes, but just with new names and new justifications. Evolution teaches us something different. It says, keep what works, transform what doesn't, and continue the story. Don't erase it. So, how do we do that today? It seems pretty big, right? Well, it starts with all of us on the individual level, by rejecting the tyranny of now and embracing the power of yet, by seeing failure as feedback and not finality, and by remembering that growth, whether it be personal or societal, isn't about tearing ourselves down, but about building on what's already there. That's what my mom taught her students. It's what therapy taught me. And it's what history has taught all of us. We don't need a revolution to move forward. We need patience. We need humility. And we need courage. The theme of Heirloom asks us, what do we preserve, what do we question, and what do we transform? Well, we must preserve the lessons and strengths that give us resilience. We must question the destructive urge to wipe the slate clean. And we must transform our individual and collective mindsets to embrace evolution through growth, curiosity, and patience. If we do that, we can build something far greater than a single revolution. We can create a nation and a generation always under construction, but never stagnant. A people unafraid of struggle, unafraid of failure, and unafraid to keep growing. So maybe that's the answer to the question I asked my grandfather all of those years ago. Will this city, will this world ever be finished? I hope not, because we're not supposed to be finished. We're supposed to keep evolving. Thank you.